Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Castillo. I'm an editor here at American City and County. Welcome to this Fast Chat. I'm here today with Scott French, President and Executive GM of Zetron. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Andy.
Anyone who's worked for any amount of time in or around emergency management knows about the advantages of outfitting emergency communication centers with the latest technology. Next-gen systems have been talked about and available for years. Scott's here today to talk about some of the obstacles response teams face in their efforts to upgrade systems, and to explain how Zetron can help organizations achieve seamless connectivity with the next generation of mission-critical communications technology. To begin, Scott, could you just tell us a little bit about what Zetron does?
Sure thing, and happy to be here, Andy, and look forward to sharing quite a bit with you about Zetron. We've been around. Zetron in and of itself has been around 40 years, but it really is a story of two companies coming together, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But what we do is provide mission-critical communication solutions to a variety of market verticals. And the one that's most near and dear to my heart is the public safety vertical. And in North America, it's when you ever have the unfortunate need to dial 911. Fortunately, not all of us have to call 911, but when we do, it's a high stress environment. And what Zetron does is we provide a series of products, services, software, and support to enable those communications to work seamlessly in the moments that matter the most.
That term "next gen" has been thrown around. It's become like a catchphrase, or I don't know, a call to action in some circles.
Sure.
It's used all the time. But what does it really mean for an emergency response technology to be next generation? And how is that any different from what many emergency communication centers are working with today?
Yeah, it's funny, everybody uses the term next generation, right? We're all very familiar with the mobile phone industry, right? The start when we first had the flip phones, right? That was first generation 1G. Nobody said 1G. And then we started to be able to do some texting and some data, and maybe some people started talking about 2G, but then all of a sudden it was 3G, 4G, and now we're into 5G, and you're sharing video, you're live streaming. It's amazing what we can accomplish with our mobile phones. Well, it's very similar in the emergency communications realm, and I'll spend most of my time talking about 911 emergency call taking. So way back, probably 50 years ago, with landline phones, remember those phones that used to hang up in your kitchen with the really long cord? If you ever,
I barely remember it.
Well, I have enough gray hair to remember that. But anyway, that was the first generation 911, and it was unbelievably novel, right? So you would pick up that phone, you would press 911 or even rotary 911, and a communication center would answer it and know where you were because they had a record. Oftentimes it was just a database record of where you were. That was first generation, unbelievably novel. Then cell phones came out, right? And nobody knew, there was no emergency underneath the cell phone tower, right? And they lost where the location was. So second generation emergency call taking went by the term E911 for electronic 911. And now with the advent of, we've moved from 2G, 4G, 5G in the mobile world, it's time for emergency call taking 911 systems to also move to next generation, because there's so much information available. You watch CSI and it's like, oh, wow, all this free flow of information coming into the dispatch center and people are able to make real-time decisions. But the bottom line is there's way too much information coming in such that that human call taker can help triage that call when it comes in, understand what that emergency is, take all that data so that we've got the right first responders responding to the scene of whatever that incident is as soon as possible. The pace of change is amazing. I mean, imagine today, the latest iPhone comes out and then it's 12 months old and the next iPhone comes out, everybody rushing to go buy that iPhone. But the 911 systems, the voice dispatch systems, the alerting systems that are the heart of these emergency communication centers, they have a life of 10, 15, 20 years, right? Could you imagine using some of your technology from 15 to 20 years ago today? Well, that's what we're facing in the 911 space, especially throughout the world, but and this conversation will be focused on North America. Now, what does Zetron believe next generation is, right? So what does it mean for the emergency communication centers of today? For us, it means true interoperability, right? So some companies talk about interoperability. We believe we build interoperability. So what that means is that emergency call taking solution needs to be interoperable, whether it's a wireless call, a landline call, text to 911, sending a text message to the 911 center, or even wanting to stream video or sending an image. All of that information has to be interoperable with everything that's happening in the emergency communication center. Needs to be absolutely user friendly, right? These are high stress environments, right? You know, somebody may be having a heart attack or there's a fire, right? You need to make instantaneous decisions. And what happens when you're overloaded with information? You tend to delay that decision making. So it's really important, as all that information is coming into the 911 center, that the right information is presented to that call taker or that dispatcher, such that they get that out into the field immediately, securely, and accurately to the right people so that we can respond quickly. Now, unfortunately, last point here, Andrew, is unfortunately, when we look at there's roughly 6,000 911 centers in North America. We estimate that about half of them are still relying at some form of first generation technology.
In another life, I was a firefighter, and I on my local call force, and I worked on an ambulance rig as well. And I understand what you're saying, and that's what I was about to say. Is that so many departments still rely on really old technology? Yeah. Why is that?
Well, again, you know, the providers in this space knew that reliability was paramount, right? So we've all, Zetron among others, have built systems that stand the test of time, that can last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? And because funding is often limited in the government space. And you mentioned firefighting, you know, you can imagine, you drive up to the intersection, they come out with their fire boot and they want to throw in, or the bake sales, right?
I've done it.
And that's a challenge, right? It's not only do the systems that were designed 15, 20 years ago are built to last, the funding mechanism just isn't quite there yet today. Now, fortunately, or unfortunately, because of some really rough events in the recent past that we've had to face, whether it's natural disaster or active shooters, those sorts of things have brought to light the need for quicker, more appropriate response, getting more information into the 911 center, such that there's various legislation out there to be voted on, various budgets that would bring significant funding to the 911 centers to modernize. We estimate, and we support these estimates, whether they come from NENA or APCO or ICERT, which Zetron is certainly a driving member of somewhere between $10 to $15 billion to modernize the 911 systems in North America. So although it's true that these 911 systems that were deployed, the ones that are still first generation, still work, but if I could find my old flip phone, I think that might still work too. But I'm not sure I want to rely on it, because I certainly couldn't check my Oriole scores on that.
And certainly with the organizations that I work with in local government, I definitely understand that they're constrained by budgets. But beyond budgets, there's also other sort of types of hurdles. How are organizations that you work with overcoming them? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are quite a few hurdles. Some of them are governance related. Some of them are leadership related. Some are local funding. Staffing is becoming an issue. Now, what we have focused on, so what Zetron, true to our identity, Zetron was founded 40 years ago. Daniels Electronics, which is the combination of the two companies formed, Zetron was formed 75 years ago. What has been steadfast to our identity is we work with everyone. Right. So if you are a provider of technology in the mission critical space, I can assure you that we have worked with them. We have interfaced with their technology. They've interfaced with our technology, whether it's computer aided dispatch, voice dispatch, call taking, alerting, or mapping. We work with everyone. Now we couple that with, we are also a land mobile radio infrastructure provider. We've remained absolutely focused on standards and compliance to those standards. So whether it be Project 25, NENA I3, that's really, really important to us, because any vendor can come up with a feature or or something novel or some kind of fad. But if it's not compliant to standards, what happens if you're a customer and you invest in that, you're going to be islanded, and then you're going to be required to continue to invest in that single vendor, even though they may not be the right choice for you. Now, the other area is we've been a pioneer in this industry ever since we got into mission critical communications. We were amongst the first vendors to integrate Rapid SOS's location-based services into the 911 center. We were the first ones to do that effectively. So what that did was, instead of a triangulation of radio towers or cell phone towers to identify where that mobile caller was, that iPhone or Android phone would send specific coordinates to the dispatch center so that they had that real-time information exactly where you were. So we were the first to do that. We were amongst the first to do text to 911, and we continue to pioneer. We were also some of the first to combine both telephony, so 911 calls coming in, with voice dispatch, right? So on a single application, so a dispatch center or 911 center, typically they invest in 5 different applications. The emergency call taking solution, which we kind of refer to as triage, right? That event is coming in, right. You've got to triage it with intake, I should say. You're intaking that call. And then you're asking that caller some questions. So the operator's now working with their computer-aided dispatch. It's kind of digesting or triaging what type of emergency is this? What type of resources do I have available? That's computer-aided dispatch. They're reviewing their maps. Okay, where are my resources? Where is this call coming from? What type of response should this be? And then they effectuate the response, coordination, and respond in terms of getting it into the hands of the first responders. We recognize that the challenge for these agencies isn't the individual applications. It's getting the information securely and accurately from intake to triage to coordination to response. So we as a company have really been focused on those gaps, such that, and that's what I was mentioning before, we work with everyone, right? So we focus on, okay, you may not have a Zetron call taking solution, but you might have a Zetron mapping or computer-aided dispatch solution. So we focus to ensure that we get that information as accurately as possible and as cleanly as possible. In one area I would kind of highlight as a customer of ours that we're really, really proud of, which is the state of Iowa. They've really, really done it right. So Iowa had a funding issue. They had a technology issue. They had a lack of interoperability issue. And through the leadership at the state level, they decided what they wanted to do is they would take the financial burden of emergency call taking on at the state level and then fund emergency call taking to all 112 emergency communication centers, all 112 911 answering points. And we put together a proposal and a design that create a shared services model such that now today, I think more than 75% of those PSAPs or emergency call centers have opted in on the Zetron technology, such that we have a statewide solution. And it's been a great partnership between the counties and the cities within Iowa and the state itself. And, I think it's a model for a lot of states and a lot of regions to look at in terms of moving forward.
To wrap this up, you mentioned a little bit about your company's history at the beginning, but where do you see you going in the future, and where do you see the industry, at large heading in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the funding is important, right? And unfortunately, if you think back to 9/11. The events of 9/11 ultimately led to the building of a broadband network for first responders in North America. And, FirstNet has largely been completed in terms of its build, but it needed that mega event. Now, certainly not hoping for a mega event, but as Congress and legislators wake up to the need, as there's more, I'll say future leaning leadership like we see in the state of Iowa, I think you'll see more aggressive investment in the 911 centers, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, or through Congress to advance next generation 911. Now, we as a company, we recognize that although we're only one of two companies that provide the 5 key applications in the dispatch center or 911 center, as well as land mobile radio, that we're not always the right fit, right? We may not have the ideal computer-aided dispatch solution for you or the ideal mapping solution for you, but we know we have something that fits, right? And I always harken back to like the Three Musketeers, like one for all and all for one. But I put the word interoperability or choice there, but I like the flow of one for all and all for one. And that's the way we look at it, right? Is, we want to make sure that we provide technology and services to our customers where it is a good fit. And no matter what, we'll learn something from that customer, even if they don't choose our technology.
Thank you, Scott. This has certainly been a really engaging conversation. It's a really important topic, and I'm sure that we'll connect more in the future as technology just starts to come out or continues to come out at a breathtaking pace. And thank you to our audience for joining us. It's been a really informative, engaging discussion, and we hope that you'll join us next time for our next Urgent Communications Fast Chat.